Hi, Olivia. Just gonna wait a few minutes for more participants to join in. So I'm gonna start in a few minutes. Hello, Stephanie, Suzanne. I can see more of you joining. If you could just introduce yourself, maybe if you can say where you are from, where you are watching this session from, that would be great. And as I said, we're gonna start in about 2 minutes. Hi, Vanessa. Hi, Lynn. And I'm sorry if I'm not going to mention everyone's names. Catherine, Bournemouth, Cardiff, Bristol, Belgium. I like the watermelon. Wow, this is going really fast now. I can see you are joining from all different places, Ireland and Dubai, Kent. Okay, this is going really fast, but hello, everyone. Hello from Moscow. Good morning. Okay. Cambridge. Okay. Gonna wait 1 more minute before I begin, because I can see lots of participants are joining right now. Hello from Manchester. Hello. Hello from London. Great. Okay, just gonna wait 1 more minute. I'm all ready to go. It's great to see that there are so many of you joining from different regions and countries. Okay, there's still some more participants joining now. Hi, Isabel. I know it's a Saturday morning, so I appreciate you joining my session about thinking hard in languages. And I think I'm gonna start it. Wow, even Australia is here. Catherine, that's impressive. Must be a huge time difference. I really appreciate you joining the session. Cool. All right. I think I'm gonna make a start. If there are some more participants joining us in the next few minutes, I'm sure they will know what's going on. So you should be all seeing my screen now. So I'll be talking about thinking hard in language sessions. My name is Witold Woźniak, and I'm a lead practitioner at Coombe Girls Academy. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about in my session today is how to incorporate linguistic creativity in language lessons, how to challenge your students' thinking in and about languages, how to differentiate your lessons, how to make language lesson cross-curricular. I always think it's a great excuse to make your lessons more than just language lessons, and how to make learners think hard. So just before I'm going to dive into my session in this theme, just a few words about myself. So I'm a lead practitioner for modern foreign languages at the Academy Trust. I teach across all the 4 key stages, key stage 2, 3, and 4. I'm a mentor for ECTs, which is newly qualified teachers. It used to be called NQTs last year, and also for student teachers. I'm an AQ examiner for the French speaking exam, and I'm a member of the Kingston and Merton Primary Languages Network, and we organize termly training sessions for specialist and non-specialist language teachers, including annual primary language conference. But it's not only about languages. I love donuts. Krispy Kremes are my favorite ones. I absolutely adore Starbucks. and also I love fitness. I presented sessions at the language show in the last 5 years, and also I have a Instagram page, Vitavos Fitness, which is about health, fitness, and nutrition. Also, I'm not only about languages, and that's why also this session will be, I'm going to give you ideas how to make your lessons very cross-curricular. So diving in, so how can we stimulate our students' thinking? So in today's sessions, some key question and key objectives is going to be, how can we ensure that our students, we teach think hard and are challenged beyond their comfort zone? And the key objective is to introduce high challenge, low preparation techniques. Obviously, as teachers, very often we don't have extra time to produce any extra resources. So I think any low preparation techniques are usually very much appreciated by language teachers, and I'm going to show you today how you can achieve it. So what does thinking hard mean? So before I'm going to give you some practical ideas, what does it mean to think hard? So a few concepts I would like you to have a think about. So when do we think hard? When you think about yourself, when do you think hard? How do we know it? How do we know that we think hard? And how do we know when our students think hard? And when they cannot think hard, how do we know it? And I'm going to show you a very specific example in a few minutes. So what strategies do we have to put in place so our students' thinking takes off beyond what's been said? And how can we adapt our lessons? So that brings me to this statement that sharks don't know that camels exist. And you may be thinking, why is he saying that? It's quite obvious, isn't it? But let me show you why sharks don't know that camels exist. If I was your language teacher and I gave you this puzzle, this word search, and I would give you 5 minutes to solve it, when you're having a look at this right now, how many words can you recognize? What are you thinking right now? Can I make you think hard right now? Probably not. So I think most of you, maybe some of you can see something, but most of you, probably you're not noticing any specific words, any specific meanings. So really, if I displayed just that, if I gave you this puzzle, you may think that this is something I cannot solve. I cannot see anything specific about. If I give you a little bit of a context, and now when you can see they are Portuguese authors, even though if you don't know them, I've displayed them on the side, this is all making a little bit more sense. So the first observation is, if you want to make your students think hard, you cannot make them think hard about things they don't know. So you cannot ask your students to make comments about something they don't have a clue about, in the same way they're not going to be able to express themselves on certain topics if you didn't cover certain foundations of it. So for instance, if I display this word, if I didn't teach how to say a station in French, they're not going to be able to put those letters in order to figure out that that stands for gare. If that was my start activity, for instance. The same way, if you do not know how sentences are structured in Latin, you're not going to put those words into a coherent sentence. And that also applies to any cultural aspect. If I'm going to say, let's have some tea, I mean, that can mean so many different things depending on your culture, depending on your traditions. Having tea, English tea, is very different from having tea in Morocco, Turkey, or Poland. So in some of those countries, tea would be drunk without milk, for instance, or tea also has a meaning maybe of having also a snack with it. So as you can see, context and your knowledge of your students is very important, and it's going to define your student success. So a few statements before we look at some practicalities. You can't make your students think about things they don't know about. And the question is, do students know what they know? I'll give you an example, a very silly story. A few years ago, when I used to teach in primary, a student said, Mr. Wojniak, I don't need to learn French. And I asked, why? I can speak it already. I said, oh, so tell me something. And he said, hola. So it really made me think, did he know what he knows, whether that was French or that was Spanish? And do you know what your students know? If students know something, do they know what they don't know? Are they reflective enough? I know those questions are really diving into everyone's brains, but it's very important to consider all that before you're gonna set an activity that's gonna challenge them to really think hard. So you cannot think for your students. When they think, they will be applying their knowledge. So the point I made a few minutes ago is they have to have some kind of knowledge to be able to apply it in a practical way. And obviously, they will be operating within the frame of knowledge of facts versus applying knowledge. So being independent thinkers. So there is a relation of thinking hard versus assessment for learning and independent thinking. So to think independently, you have to be able to understand certain concepts, not just learning it by heart. So how do you make thinking hard interesting, engaging, effective, and self and cross-reflective? So let me give you some practical examples to begin with. You can give them a quiz, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about in a few minutes. You can make them respond to what you are displaying or discussing. You can involve them, you can personalize it, or you can make it competitive. I know this is very vague, so let me talk a little bit more about how you can quiz your students to make them think hard. So for instance, a quiz, and that's going to be a very obvious statement, could be ABC, where they have to choose one of the correct answers out of 3. You can make it more challenging by giving them 4 options, A, B, C, D, another classic. But if you really want to make it more challenging, you can give options A, B, C, where 1 or 2 answers are correct. So the guessing option, oh, I'm gonna try now B because last time was A, actually doesn't apply so much because probability of getting the answer right actually relates more to the knowledge and understanding of the topic. So you can make it even more challenging. You can give A, B, C, D, where no answer is correct, or 1 or 2 answers are correct. And that's going to be really making them think hard before they give you an option, an answer, which one is correct. Why would you do this kind of a quiz? Well, to check for their understanding. It's quite engaging. And it's more demanding from them to actually think and maybe access their notes. It's more personalized, differentiated at the same time. So this is an example of a quiz that was designed by my primary students, year 5 students last year. I gave them sticky notes and they had to write questions. And as you can see, I wasn't typing in what they did. I just made a quiz. There were 20 questions. This is just 1 page of it. And I stuck it on 2 pages, photocopied for everyone. And I said, okay, this is the quiz you designed. Now you have to solve it. Let's see if you can solve your class's quiz and how many points out of 20 you can get. They really enjoyed it because they could see some of their questions, but also for me, a very interesting thing was to see how many students actually can design a quiz, which is a little bit challenging. Or can they actually design a quiz? Do they understand what asking specific questions related to a topic should be about? If you cannot write a question, or if you write a question but you cannot write the right answer, it shows your lack of understanding, or it shows your understanding of the topic. That was a very interesting exercise. So for instance, you can make it more cross-curricular or with some elements of cultural understanding. So for instance, you can display a picture of someone. So let's say Mylène Farmer speaks, and you give some options in the target language. So the question doesn't have to be in the target language. So it's kind of inviting to find out a little bit more about whatever you're asking about, but the answers display some vocabulary that is quite obvious for your class, but it's going to make them think, for instance, who is she? Or if they forgot one of the words, there's more likely they're going to access their notes to find out a little bit more. So this is an invitation for students to think a little bit more before they give you an answer. What does it mean to respond? So to respond, so for instance, you display a number of sentences and you ask your students what statement applies to you. So for instance, you may apply as a French language teacher mainly. I'm displaying most of the examples in French, but there will be some examples in Italian and Spanish as well. So for instance, if you display a sentence, I'm funny or I'm awful, maybe you can say, okay, can you write the sentence that applies to you? And obviously we don't want them to say I'm awful, but that's gonna maybe encourage your students to check what affreux means first before they're gonna commit themselves, or they're gonna check what drôle means because they don't want to write a statement that will be describing them in a bad light. So you can say, okay, one of those statements is about you. Which one you're going to apply? Is it je suis drôle or je suis affreux? 30 seconds or 1 minute, write it down. That could be a good start activity. Or for instance, how much money or pocket money they have. Or for instance, they can express an opinion about someone and finish off the sentence about Justin Bieber, how he is. And again, that's more likely they're gonna feel more passionate about expressing opinion and using some adjectives about someone famous. Or for instance, they can say what they like or dislike. So I'm 15 years old and I like football, or I'm 15 years old and I don't like football. And again, class can respond in a way they like, and they only copy one sentence, specific sentence that applies to them. So what does it mean to involve and engage to make your students think hard? Well, for instance, you can ask your students to work in pairs. So it can be a question answer practice. What does it mean? That can be a good plenary or good start activity. So you ask a question. So you ask your students, okay, can you work in pairs? You can ask a question in the target language or in English first. So for instance, I open my book and I ask, so today we've been learning about places in town. How do you say bakery? And my partner says la boulangerie. Okay, now my partner's gonna ask a question. My partner can ask a question in the target language. So what does it mean, magasin? And they just question each other. It's more engaging when it's not you asking, because obviously you can make it more competitive and say, okay, let's see if you can beat your partner. The same way it can be a dictation where they dictate the keywords to each other, or they playing hangman. They absolutely adore it. It's very engaging. You can stand on the side, have your croissant and coffee, and believe me, for 5 minutes, they will get busy, unless you have a horrible class. It happens. You can also ask your students to research or find certain elements, linguistic elements in a text. So for instance, highlight past tense or connectives or numbers. And if you're going to be very specific about, you can say, there are 7 verbs in the past tense. There are 6 different connectives and there are 5 numbers. If you give those specific numbers, again, it is a little bit more engaging for them to tick all the boxes and being able to find it, or being intrigued, which one is missing? Where is this past tense I cannot find? Well, comparing 2 descriptions or contents, so maybe you can give 2 texts describing a city or a place of interest or a famous person, which differ slightly, and they have to compare it. They have to find some differences. Comparing doesn't have to be always in the target language. I think sometimes demonstrating and actually making a comment in English or whatever language, how those texts are different, it's a good checking of their comprehension. So obviously language doesn't always operate in the target language. And also we know that exams, I know the boring part, but exams sometimes check your understanding in your language. Categorizing things. So for instance, can you divide the text? Which parts of the text talk about a house, city, or holiday destination? Can be also a competitive translation. So you give a few sentences, a paragraph to translate, and they have to translate it by themselves in pairs. So that means you are competing against your partner. Whoever's gonna translated correctly will be the winner, or you can they can be translating as tables. And again, students like being competitive. So how you can personalize it? So for instance, you can ask your students to put the words that you are teaching in order of importance. So which ones matter to them most. So for instance, what ice cream they like most or least, or what animal we've been learning about, which one they would like to have as the first, second, third, and fourth, or what color do you like most or least. So as you can see, that can easily apply in primary school, because we can even tell them, okay, what's your favorite day of the week? But also we can apply it at Key Stage 4, Key Stage 3, where they can be putting more advanced words or even sentences or opinions about school subjects, or even time of the day in the right order. And whose statements do you agree with most? So if there is a text and someone is maybe expressing opinions about environment or about future projects or school, which one, whose statements do you agree with most? And students have to put it in the right order. So making it competitive is definitely something that students absolutely adore. It is always a good icebreaker and also a good way of bringing things, making things more lively in your lessons. So, for instance, you could ask your students to say, what would the Queen say? And you can give them a little bit of context. So what would the Queen say about her vacances? Or what would the Queen say about le logement? And again, it's not about the Queen, but it's just taking their attention away. Oh, I'm not writing about myself. What would she say? Where would she go? Where would she stay? Or for instance, if she was describing su casa or la ciudad, what would she say? How would she describe it? And again, it makes them think. So it's taking a little bit of weight off the shoulders in a way that they don't have to say what they think. They can maybe a little bit freer, use a different vocabulary. Another example could be to describe not your holiday, but holiday of Lil Nas X. And for instance, that's an example in Italian. So for instance, che cosa ha fatto, che cosa ha mangiato, dove è andato. So where did he go? What did he eat? What did he do? And again, it's a good invitation to engage your students to write it in the third person of singular, so slightly different from the first. And again, using a little bit of imagination, or displaying a slide, a picture, and asking, what is he thinking? What do you think he's thinking? There's a very open plan, a good starter, because he can be doubting something, but he can be sarcastic, he could be funny. And again, it encourages creativity and for your students to have a think about what he could say. Or for instance, what would Brittany order from this menu? So we are making it very cross-curricular, so they can actually see a menu in a different language. Maybe they can ask some questions about some different dishes. So maybe you can also introduce some different concepts. And now, knowing that Brittany is free, finally, she can order whatever she likes from the menu. And then again, they maybe have, let's say you give them 1 minute and okay, you have to place an order. You can turn it not only into a writing practice, but also into a speaking activity. Or you can display a picture and you can ask them, okay, what could be written underneath to make it funny, or what is she saying to the child? And again, you can give them some time, or even can be homework, and you can see what students would write, and this is what it says. Obviously, we don't want our students to say that. So podcasts have become really popular, and podcasts, you can find them everywhere. You can find them on Spotify. There is a podcast application, and also there are lots of podcasts on YouTube. So I definitely encourage you to use podcast if you want to make your students think hard. I'm going to mainly relate it to Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, but also there are some podcasts for younger children. So I'm pretty sure there are so many different options. If you look for podcasts that could interest your students, I'm pretty sure you will always find something. But I'm going to relate it to Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 as Spanish learners. I'm currently learning Spanish, and one podcast which I really find interesting is a Spanish language coach, intermediate Spanish podcast, which has a range of tools to make you think hard and also make your learning interesting, cross-curricular, intercultural. So when you on the website of Spanish language coach, you can find a free ebook, you have podcasts, also you have transcripts, and what is really interesting, you can also access transcription. So if you do not understand certain things, you can actually print it out or have a look on your screen. And also an example where you have lots of spelling activities, you can test your understanding, you have matching activities, you have flashcards. So lots of help and lots of very interesting themes. For instance, about learning languages, about your personality, about different myths related to language learning. So how could you use podcasts to make your students think hard? So there are so many resources like this one here online, which you can find. And without any super preparation, podcasts are great because what you can do, you can encourage your students to write 5 sentences about. So it doesn't have to be something specific. They can listen to a podcast, which is, you can even play the main 5 minutes of the podcast and say, can you write 5 sentences about? Again, doesn't have to be in the target language, or you can differentiate. You can say, some of you can write partially in the target language, some of you only in the target language, some of you just write it in English, but you can check their understanding. Do they know what the theme is about? Or maybe they have to come up with the title. You don't have to display, okay, we're going to listen to a podcast about something. Can you tell me what they are talking about? So obviously you can have multiple questions, which you can use just like from the Spanish language coach, where you have some specific questions or flashcards ready to go. You don't need to have any preparation, but also you can give a preview or disclose a catchphrase, or something that is being very strongly stated in the podcast, and invite students to find out more about. So for instance, you can say, okay, a person in this podcast is saying that we should do something for the environment. What is this person saying? Or just you ask those students to note 5 sentences from the podcast and translate it. So I'm just gonna give you an example of a Spanish language coach talking about education in Spain. I'm just going to play a few seconds of this podcast. If you're a language speaker, you're going to be able to understand. And I'm going to tell you, so if you could just try to listen, trying to think hard, how much you can understand what he's talking about. If you speak French or Italian, probably you'll be able to understand some words. And what is the meaning of education he's talking about during the 60 seconds that I'm going to play to you now? Okay.
Sí, creo que en España la primera etapa es lo que llamamos educación infantil, desde los 0 años, desde que somos bebés hasta los 6 años, es la educación infantil. Y es una educación no obligatoria. ¿Okay? Un niño no es necesario que esté escolarizado, no es necesario que esté en una escuela hasta los 6 años. No es obligatorio, es opcional. Lo cierto es que la mayoría de niños, a partir de los 3 años aproximadamente, ya van al colegio en hacer su educación infantil, pero no es obligatorio. A partir de los 6 años hasta los 12 tenemos la educación primaria. Son 6 cursos. Primero de primaria, segundo de primaria, tercero de primaria, cuarto de primaria, quinto de primaria y sexto de primaria. Como curiosidad os diré
So it's just an example of introducing the educational system in Spain. So it's obviously students can learn a little bit more than the language itself, but also what is great about he explains in this podcast, in this session, which is about 15 minutes long, he expressed the meaning of education as academic education, but also education, cultural education. So for instance, how to behave yourself when you're at a table. So again, you can ask your students to reflect upon the meaning or certain definitions, or say, okay, he's talking about 2 different types of education. What is it? So you can ask some specific questions, again, in the target language or in English. So this is just one example how podcast actually can help you to turn it into interesting listening practice, but also bringing the language alive and really make them think hard. Okay, just trying to move to the next slides. Just bear with me. Okay. Okay. So another one. Another example is who said it. So you display certain statements in the target language and you give them some time to have a think, okay, how do you understand it? What does it mean? There can be some very short statements and you can say, okay, one of it was said by Madonna, one by Martin Luther King, and one by Robin Williams. You can make it more relevant, obviously, knowing your students. And you give them a few minutes not to only understand what those statements are about, but also who said it. And then in a few minutes, you display the answer so they can see what it means and how it was said in the target language. So another way to make it a little bit more relevant and engaging. Another thing you can ask your students to do is to write 10 things you didn't know about me. So they have to have a thing, something that others don't know about them, and they have to write it in the target language, or you can display some historical or geographical facts versus 2 which are not true. I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. Or you can play a game, which is called Mind Reader, or you can ask them to design a crossworded word search. So let me give you an example about 10 things you didn't know about me. So for instance, they can be very simple statements like je n'aime pas la glace à la fraise or je n'aime pas la mathématique. And again, as you can see, this sentence has as a mistake. And if you really want them to think hard, you can say, oh, we have a few sentences on the board. Can you find which one has a mistake and where it is? Again, a little bit more engaging and actually checking their understanding, but also whether they pay attention. Or some statements which apply to geography. So you display 3 different statements and they have to say which one is true, which one is not. And again, hopefully it's going to make them think about what's correct, what not, and what it means. Mind Reader, it's a good activity to make them speak, but also write some sentences. So students work in pairs, or you can work as a class. So for instance, you think of a sentence, so you choose a sentence. Let's say you decide that your sentence is dans ma chambre, il y a 2 chats et aussi une lampe. So what they have to do, if you want to guess what is my sentence, you have to be moving from gray. You have to guess my gray section first before you move to the green one, and then before you move to the blue one. So let me give you an example. If you say dans ma maison, I say non. So you say dans ma chambre, I say oui. So now you can move to the next section. You say dans ma chambre, il y a des livres. Non. Dans ma chambre, il y a 2 chats. Oui, because I was thinking about 2 chats. So now I can move to the blue section. So you're going to say dans ma chambre, il y a 2 chats et aussi, and whatever it is until you guess the sentence. So it makes me speak, or it makes you speak. And once you guessed my sentence, you need to write it down and maybe translate it. Students absolutely adore it. So it's a very inviting activity when it comes to speaking and writing. Another example could be to say what I did in the last 7 days, or what I did last summer, or 3 things I will do this evening,
and they can write it from different perspectives. So for instance, what Lady Gaga would write about what she did in the last 7 days, or what she did last summer, or 3 things she will do this evening, or Obama, or anyone else. So again, you can make it, you can change the person, you can change perspectives, so it is a little bit more imaginative. Or maybe they have to match or label statements with historical events or descriptions. Also, you can use movies or short videos from YouTube where they have to note the sentence or a sentence that says that, for instance, speaking languages is useful. How was it phrased? How did they say it? Or they have to find a note which criticizes government's approach, or maybe the sentence which offers solutions to something. Or maybe they have to circle, so you give them a statement, okay, so we're gonna watch a video, and this video represents, is it an optimistic or pessimistic outlook? Or is Diana in the story? Or Diana is talking about something in the video, in the movie, so you show 3-4 minutes, okay, is she happy or disappointed? So again, you just give some very simple statements, and students have to give you some very basic answers before they dive into obviously more questions and specific content of the video. So break the codes. It's another great activity to make your students think and investigate. So for instance, you could display, this is all in French, you could display some different strange looking words or numbers and tell them, okay, those are the words you learned in your last lesson or last few lessons, but I used the very special codes. Can you break it? Can you be a good spy and figure out what that means? So the first one, for instance, is Paris. So as you can see, this is from reading from the end will be Paris. And once they know some strategies, they're gonna be better at thinking hard. So next time you show them something like that, they're gonna maybe break it straight away to make it more challenging. For instance, this one is Je voudrais une glace. As you can see, I mixed the letters here. You could make it more challenging. Instead of actually giving them a hint and separate the words, you can actually put it all together, just like numbers in Italian, to make it super long. And that's very confusing because they have to figure out how many words are here. So maybe this concept would be easier to begin with. Applying numbers. So this is France. How do you know it? Well, F is the 6th letter of the alphabet and E is the 5th letter of the alphabet. So they just assign a different number to a different letter. This is exactly the same thing. That says Londres, but it's the last letter of the alphabet is number 1 and AE is obviously the highest number. So again, this is really playing with the mind. And it's not something you're going to do it every lesson, but believe me, students absolutely adore it. And once they break the code, they can actually not detect, but they can write some very interesting sentences, or sometimes reaccess the words they wouldn't necessarily use by themselves. So I would just recommend to do it maybe, you know, when you have a special session before Christmas, or when you have this last, one of the last sessions in the summer term. Students absolutely adore quizzes like that. It's a good initiative. Sudokus are another way how you can make your students think hard, and you can make it very engaging by, for instance, inviting your students to practice some grammar topics or spelling of some numbers. So wrapping up my session about thinking hard, really what we want our students to access in lessons is this little cupcake. So the cake is their knowledge of understanding. The icing on the cake is their ability to analyze and apply different elements of your teaching. But the cherry on the cake is their flexibility of thinking and demonstrating they can use it independently. And that's really what we are aiming for. So 12 thinking hard devices you can use in your lessons are those. And I could divide those 12 thinking hard devices into knowledge and understanding, analysis and application, and flexibility of thinking. So for instance, comparing something or extending something would demonstrate the flexibility of thinking. If they have to prioritize or categorize different words or different texts or criticize something, that's going to be more analysis and application. And knowledge and understanding will be maybe about reducing, so writing a summary of something, deconstructing something, or transforming, changing something. So what does it mean transforming something? For instance, someone is describing a holiday in the first person of singular, and your students have to rewrite it in the first person of plural, or change it into third person of singular, or changing present tense into past tense, or past tense into future tense. So how do professionals learn and grow their practice? Is always by observing first, so listening to you, the teacher, collaborating, challenging thinking, trying, getting some feedback, trying again. So really the learning is about practice, feedback, and modification. So by modifying your delivery and the way you teach languages, you will make them practice it in many different ways. And we don't know what learning is about. We don't know what knowledge is about. We don't know what is the best way of learning or teaching. That's why the more platforms we give them to think hard and access languages in many different ways, the more feedback they're going to receive and more modifications they're going to hopefully apply in their practice. So the washing hands of learning. So for instance, they could, for instance, read an article and reduce the argument to 2 sentences, or they could prioritize or highlight the single most important words or extend something. So more ideas for thinking hard, feedback in lessons, because as we said, feedback is a very important part of your thinking hard strategies. So for instance, you could offer your students the same 5-question quiz at the beginning and end of the lesson to see if there is any progression. You can create flashcards of key vocab or words, and they can use it for self or pair testing at the very end, or masterminds where students quiz each other on key vocabulary, and then they choose one student who knows the most to translate as many words as they can in 1 minute. Again, a very competitive aspect. And their teammates needs to try and translate more than the other nominated students from other groups. Any words which they frequently get wrong became the keywords for next time. So more examples could be match word to definition, goldfish, dog, elephant. So test students on one item from last lesson, from last week, and one from last topic. So maybe from last term, to make them think and access their notes. Only connect, where you provide students with anagrams of keywords with the vowels removed, and can they decode them and apply each one in a sentence, so kind of revisiting their previous learning. And only connect, vocab wall, where you provide students with a grid of 16 keywords, and they have to categorize it into different groups. So, okay, which ones are about holiday, which ones are about school day, which ones are timings, which one are connectives, or so on. So we don't want our students to be thinking that something that they're learning is not really connected. We want them to think this way, to be able to connect different elements of their language understanding to become independent thinkers. So all we need to make them is to practice, practice, practice. Obviously should be with an S as a verb, but practice is the most important element. So I hope some of the strategies I mentioned today for thinking hard, you're gonna try some of them in your lessons, and you have found some elements of this presentation useful. And I'm really sorry if I'm not gonna be able to take your questions, because we have to finish in the next 2 minutes, but I'm just looking, there are some comments. I think this presentation will be online for the next 4 weeks. So if you want to see the slides or watch this session again, you are very welcome to. So I know you're going to be sent a link. But thank you very much for attending my sessions and for listening to me, and have a great afternoon. And if you are attending any other sessions, enjoy them. Dziękuję, Karolina. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your thank yous. And have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matthew. Sorry if I cannot make it personal to everyone, but I'm just reading it. It's going very fast. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Aparna. Audrey, thanks. Merci. Thanks. Thanks, Ajan, Divya. Thanks, Raina. Okay, thanks, everyone.